Today's class I want to show you how to prepare frames. Now these frames can be used for either door wreaths, maybe getting ready for a workshop, maybe using them for grave wreaths, and even these can be used for artificial floral wreaths. So what I'm going to use is what we call a 12-inch wire ring. These come in different sizes in your wholesalers. You can also buy them in different quantities. Normally 20 is the minimum, but they also sell them in bundles of 25. You can buy them from an 8-inch ring, a 10-inch ring, 12 is the most popular, but also they go up 14, 16, and I have seen them up to around 20, which is hard to buy. But I have shown my students before how to use bull wire to make like a larger size frame if they did actually require it. The next thing that you need is a roll of reel wire. I call this reel wire, spelled R-E-E-L. A lot of people call it mossing wire, and that's what it's for. It's for mossing up frames. Now when it comes to mossing up frames, you can use obviously your traditional moss. Now what you're going to find in Ireland and the UK, there is a shortage of moss. It is actually very hard to get. Just to warn you, it isn't illegal to go out and just forage moss. You do need a license for it. The moss I'm using today was actually one of my students, has it actually in her own grounds, her own fields, and she actually supplied me with it. It is possible to buy moss in from your Dutch wholesalers, your Dutch suppliers. Go onto the Dutch websites and you can check it out. But what a lot of florists are using as an alternative is straw. So again, what I find living in Dublin, in the city, obviously we can't get bales of straw, but what we do is we go to our local pet shop, we buy bags of straw, and then we use that. And to be honest, it works out great value, it's really cheap, and you get lots of frames out of the one bag. It's very hard to say how many bags of moss, or how many It's very hard to say how many moss frames you get out of a bag of moss, because some people will put the moss on really thick, some people will put on a little bit thinner. So all I can say there is go and experiment, buy yourself a bag of moss and try it out, and then you can judge. There's no point in me saying you'll get 10 out of a bag or 20 out of a bag. Again, everybody will come up with a different number, and it's exactly the same with moss. But I'm going to do both frames for you now, just to show you step by step. And remember, if you're running this as a workshop and you do decide to let your participants moss up or prepare their own frames, you need to know all these little tricks that I'm going to explain to you. It makes life an awful lot easier. So make sure you have a notebook and pen ready, that you can take notes as we go along. For anyone that doesn't want to buy the wire rings or the reel wire in bulk, we do sell them on our own website under Floral Sundries. So what I'm doing first is I'm hooking the wire in around the wire ring, and then I'm going to give it 1 or 2 little twists. You could use twine instead of the reel wire, and what you would do there is just tie on a knot. Now with the moss, what I do, you can use gloves if you want to, right? I prefer to do without the gloves. So what you do with the moss is that you make it into what I call like a fat sausage shape. Do you see what I'm doing there? Squeezing it. This is absolutely lovely moss, okay? And it's also dry. I prefer to moss when the moss is actually dry. That way then your reel wire won't go rusty. Where if you moss when it's wet, it means if you're doing them way in advance, okay, like maybe 3 months, 4 months in advance, there is a chance that the reel wire will go rusty and will start to deteriorate. So I prefer to do it dry. Moss is a natural sponge, so all you have to do with the moss frame at a later date is dip it in a basin of water and it'll absorb the water for you. So squeeze that into, as I call, a sausage shape, and then you're going to place it on the frame. Now always work that the reel wire is near your body, is on the outside of the ring. A lot of people when they're mossing, okay, they moss backwards. They use the reel wire coming into their chest rather than the reel wire going away from your chest. So that is something to be aware of, especially if you have participants on a workshop. I'm now going to bring you in a little bit closer so you can see exactly in detail what I'm going to do next. So what I like to do is squeeze the moss onto the wire ring, and I have the reel wire attached already. I then wrap the reel wire into the inner circle, lift up the frame, pull it through and pull it nice and tight. Leave about 2 or 3 centimeters gap and do the exact same technique. So throw it into the center, lift up your ring, pull the reel wire out and pull the wire nice and tight. Again, throw it into the center, leaving 2 or 3 centimeters gap, pull it tight. Leave 2 or 3 centimeters gap, pull it tight. And that's the technique. And after a while, you kind of start that you kind of get into the flow of it, and it makes life really easy. What you then do is you get another fat sausage of moss. So again, you get your moss, and there's a few little creepy crawlies in this, okay? So always make your participants, if you are doing a workshop, make them aware that the chances are there will be, I see one climbing across the table there. So you get your little sausage of moss and you slightly overlap the last one, you see there, right? And again, squeeze it in. So with my left hand, I'm right-handed, just to make you aware, I squeeze that onto the frame. I have the real wire attached here. Again, throw it into the center, lift up the frame and pull. Leave about 2 or 3 centimeters spacing. Again, throw it into the center, lift up the wire ring and pull nice and tight. Throw it into the center, lift up and pull nice and tight. Throw it into the center. And what I also find is don't unravel the wire. And that's why I prefer the wire rather than roll of twine. You find that the roll of twine is normally thicker, so a lot of it unravels, where it's much easier when you have like a tight space, you know, that way between the roll of real wire and your actual frame. Now again, I will be going around a second time, so I'm just turning that around to you. And again, I'm going to get another, what we call fat sausage of moss. Okay, squeeze it all in there together as tight as you can. I'm slightly overlapping with, so don't leave a space, slightly overlap. Squeeze that onto the frame, and again your real wire is in the space. Throw it in, lift up and pull it tight. Throw it in, lift up and pull it tight. So the longer you can make your sausage shapes with the moss, the quicker you'll get around. So you can see already there, that was 3 sausages of moss that I've used so far. It'll probably take me 2 more. So again, we're going to get our moss. We're going to make this as lovely. Look, it's nearly like, you know, grass on one side. So again, tucking it in, making that fat sausage shape. Now I am putting a decent piece of moss onto these frames. You would get away with a little bit less. Just for the demonstration, it's nicer if I put on a decent amount. Again, I'm coming in here, overlapping, lifting up the frame, throwing in the real wire, and around we go. And odd time, as I just did there, you can catch your finger, but you'll learn to slip your finger out quick enough. Now you could use gloves, but I find when I'm throwing the real wire in here, it's inclined to catch the rubber of the gloves, and I find that slows me down. So that's why I prefer not to use the gloves. So now I'm just at this section here, so I'm going to get another little bit of moss, make a small little sausage this time, squeeze it into that space, and around we go again, just to catch that in. So that's me after going around once, and as you can see there, it took 4.5 like sausages of the moss. Now what I'm going to do is go around a second time. So again, around and pull, around and pull, around and pull, around and pull. And you just keep going, pulling that in there nice and tight. Somebody's obviously knocking at the door there, we'll get them. And around we go. And you can see already how tight that has went towards the side, you see that I haven't done. Now I would have quite a strong hand, and I'm obviously used to doing this. You can see already how neat it looks as well. But if you find that you're not getting it as tight the second time around, especially when you only start, sometimes it's a good idea to go around a third time. So again, just go around, and what I'm doing is I'm working my way around until I come back to where I actually started. So again, which is about this area here. Sometimes you're not 100% sure. And if you go a little bit extra or you stop a little bit short, it really doesn't matter. So round we go, and I'm just now at the last section where I'm ready to cut the wire. So what I do now is I cut the wire. The spare piece of wire that's left over, I make what we call a hairpin or a bend or a horseshoe bend on the wire, and I basically stick it back up into the frame. Store them that direction, okay? And what I like to do is that I have a sweeping brush handle. This is the best way to do it. Place the sweeping brush handle in between your rings, you know, have lots of them kind of on the one sweeping brush handle. Suspend it so it's not tipping on the ground, and that way there the air can circulate around them. It'll keep them dry and it stops them getting flattened. Where a lot of people, what they do is they place them on the ground and then put the next one on top of it and the next one on top of it. They'll start to smell because the bottom ones, the air can circulate, and they also start to kind of get very flat looking, where that will be much, I'll have a much better shape if I leave it suspended. And then nearer the time when I am going to use it, I'll just dip it down into water. It's a natural sponge, it'll absorb the water, and then I can make the frame, make my whatever wreath I decide to do, make it onto that actual base. The idea and the advantage of a moss base is that the moisture from the base will keep your foliage that little bit fresher. Years and years and years ago, okay, before Oasis rings came about, everybody worked on mossed frames, and even fresh floral wreaths were made on mossed frames. And now with the era of sustainability, compostable and things being biodegradable, people are going back to using mossed frames instead of using floral foam. You know what I mean? Some people, not everybody. And again, it's not possible to get all of the shapes, you know what I mean, in moss that you would be able to get in floral foam. But if you ever have any questions about anything like that, feel free to ask me. So that's our mossed frame ready to work on.